It started on a quiet Friday evening, the kind of night that usually meant takeout, a movie, and Maya scrolling through her emails while I tried to stay awake beside her. But that night felt different the moment she mentioned her best friend was coming over. "Just for a few days," she said, half smiling as she cleared space in the guest room. Liam had just gone through a breakup, and Maya didn't want him to be alone. I'd met him once or twice before, funny, confident, the kind of person who filled a room without trying. Still, I told myself it was fine. He was her friend, and I trusted her. When the doorbell rang, I remember wiping my hands on a towel and hearing Maya's excited voice at the door. "Liam," she said, hugging him tightly. He stepped inside with his suitcase, his voice warm and easy. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, though he looked perfectly at home already. I smiled, offered to take his bag, and we all sat in the living room talking about old times and college stories I'd never heard before. It was harmless, at least it seemed that way. As the evening went on, Maya got pulled into a work call that wouldn't end, leaving Liam and me alone. He leaned back on the couch, glancing toward her office door, then back at me. "She still works like she's in a race," he joked. I laughed softly. "Yeah, she does." The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was calm, familiar in a strange way. We started talking about random things, the music playing softly in the background, his recent breakup, my job, how long Maya and I had been married. He listened more intently than most people do, asking questions, nodding in a way that made me feel seen. The clock ticked past midnight before Maya came out, apologizing for the long call. "You guys didn't wait up for me, did you?" she asked. We both smiled, pretending not to notice how much time had passed. She yawned and said she was heading to bed. I showed Liam to the guest room, turning on the small lamp beside the bed. "Make yourself comfortable," I said. "Bathrooms across the hall." He smiled and said, "Thanks, Ethan, really." As he brushed past me to set his bag down, his hand accidentally brushed my arm. It was nothing, probably unintentional, but for some reason it stayed in my mind long after I turned off the light. That night, lying beside Maya, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of rain starting against the window. It wasn't that anything inappropriate had happened. It was more the feeling that something in the air had shifted. I told myself it was just because I wasn't used to having someone else in the house, that it was just friendly energy. But deep down, I knew that wasn't entirely true. There had been a moment in that living room, a look that lingered just long enough to be noticed. The next morning, Maya was already up, making breakfast with Liam chatting beside her. They looked comfortable, like family. I walked in, and Liam smiled at me the way people do when they're trying not to let something show. We ate together, joked, and tried to act normal, but I could feel something unspoken hovering around us. Maya didn't notice. She was in her own world of meetings and plans. When she left for the office, the house grew quiet again, and the silence felt heavier than before. Liam offered to help me clean up, and as we stood side by side at the sink, I caught myself noticing how easy he was to talk to, how natural it felt. He asked about my hobbies, my work, and for a moment I almost forgot that he was my wife's best friend. I caught myself smiling, then quickly stepped back, pretending to check my phone. It wasn't right to feel anything beyond friendliness, and yet it was there, subtle but undeniable. When he laughed, it filled the room, and for a split second, I felt warmth where there should have been distance. It scared me. I excused myself, saying I had work to do, and spent the rest of the afternoon trying to distract myself. But as the day went on, that small spark refused to fade. It wasn't passion or desire. It was curiosity, an emotional pull I couldn't explain. That night, as I watched Maya and Liam talking on the couch, laughing at something on TV, I realized I wasn't jealous. I was confused by the way he made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in a long time. I knew I was playing with thoughts I shouldn't have. I told myself it was just admiration, that it would pass. But deep down, I knew something small and dangerous had already begun, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, it was there, quietly waiting to grow. The next morning felt strangely calm, but underneath that calmness was a quiet awareness neither of us dared to speak about. Maya had left early for work, leaving just Liam and me in the house. The rain from the night before had turned the air cool and clean. I made coffee, trying to keep things normal. Liam joined me in the kitchen, his hair still damp from a shower, wearing a soft gray hoodie. "Smells good," he said, nodding toward the mug I poured for him. We sat opposite each other at the table, steam rising between us, both pretending not to notice how long our eyes lingered. He asked about my work, about how Maya and I met, about little things that didn't matter but somehow did. He listened closely, smiling at parts that weren't even funny. It felt good to talk, but it also felt wrong, like sharing too much with someone I shouldn't. I reminded myself that he was just a guest, that he was Maya's best friend, and that I was reading too much into everything. But when he laughed and said softly, "You're easier to talk to than I expected," something in my chest tightened. Later in the day, a small thing happened that changed everything. The cabinet door in the kitchen had come loose, and I decided to fix it before Maya got home. Liam offered to help, insisting he was good with tools. We knelt side by side beneath the counter, laughing at how stubborn the screws were. When our hands reached for the same screwdriver, they brushed together, an innocent mistake, but neither of us pulled away right away. There was a pause, a breath that lasted too long. I finally stepped back, pretending to focus on the cabinet, my heartbeat loud in my ears. For the rest of the afternoon, we avoided being alone in the same room. It wasn't planned, but it happened naturally, like we were both afraid of the quiet. When Maya returned home, full of energy and plans for dinner, everything snapped back into place. She didn't notice the distance between Liam and me, the careful politeness, the effort to look relaxed. I wished she did notice, because maybe that would have stopped what came next. That night after dinner, Maya went to bed early. She had an early meeting the next morning. I stayed downstairs for a while, cleaning up the dishes and trying to unwind. Liam came in quietly, holding 2 glasses of wine. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. I hesitated but nodded, taking the glass. We stood by the window, watching the rain start again. The sound filled the silence between us. It started as small talk, harmless and safe. Then he said, "You and Maya seem solid." "You're lucky," I smiled, though it felt forced. "Yeah, we've had our ups and downs, like anyone." He looked at me for a moment, then said, "I can tell you care about her a lot." His tone was soft, almost admiring. But there was something else behind it, something that felt personal. The conversation drifted toward loneliness, how relationships change over time, how people grow apart even when they don't mean to. Liam admitted he hadn't been himself lately, that the breakup had left him feeling lost. I found myself saying things I hadn't said out loud in years, about feeling unseen, about how love sometimes turns into routine. It felt like a relief to speak it, but at the same time, guilt crept in with every word. The rain grew heavier. He was standing close now, the soft light from the window outlining his face. There was no sound except the rain and our breathing. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. He reached out, gently resting his hand on my arm, a gesture of comfort, nothing more. But it was enough to make every unspoken thought real. I froze. My chest tightened, and for a moment I didn't move. Then I stepped back, my voice low. "We shouldn't," I said. He nodded immediately, eyes full of regret. "I know," he whispered. "I didn't mean to," but he stopped himself. We stood there in silence, the rain echoing against the glass. I set the glass down and said goodnight, my voice trembling slightly. As I climbed the stairs, I could still feel the warmth of his touch on my skin, faint but unforgettable. Lying in bed beside Maya, I stared into the dark, feeling both guilty and hollow. It wasn't about desire, it was about connection, the kind that fills an emptiness you didn't know existed. I knew it was wrong, but part of me also knew it was too late to pretend it hadn't happened. Something invisible had crossed between us, and I had no idea how to go back. Chat G. The morning after that night, the house felt unusually quiet. The tension from the night before hung between us like fog that refused to clear. I tried to act normal, made breakfast, opened the curtains, played soft music from the radio, but the calmness felt heavy, forced. Maya was cheerful, humming to herself as she prepared her coffee, completely unaware of the storm in my head. Liam joined us a few minutes later, offering his usual warm smile, but even his voice carried something different. Soft, careful, like every word was measured. We sat together at the table, pretending everything was fine. Maya talked about her upcoming presentation while Liam nodded politely. I caught him glance at me once, quickly looking away when our eyes met. The guilt twisted in my chest. Nothing had happened, not really, but something had changed, and we both knew it. When Maya left for work, she kissed my cheek and told Liam she'd miss having him around. "Stay as long as you need," she said kindly. He smiled, but his eyes flickered toward me for a moment before he turned away. A few hours later, as Liam packed his things, I stood in the hallway pretending to check messages on my phone. I wanted to say something, to thank him for staying, to apologize, to clear the air, but every word I thought of sounded wrong. He zipped up his bag and looked at me. "I should get going," he said. "Thanks for letting me crash here." I nodded, my throat tight. "Any time," I said quietly, though we both knew that wasn't true. He paused by the door. The light from outside fell across his face, and for a second it felt like time slowed down. "Ethan," he said softly, "about last night." I interrupted him before he could finish. "It's fine," I said quickly. We were both just tired. It was nothing. He looked at me, as if deciding whether to believe me, then gave a small, sad smile. "Yeah," he said. "Nothing." He picked up his bag, hesitated for a moment, then added, "You're a good guy, Ethan. Don't forget that." And then he was gone. The door closed quietly behind him, and the silence that followed felt louder than any noise could have been. That evening, when Maya came home, she noticed the change immediately. "He left?" she asked, setting her purse down. I nodded. "Yeah, he had to get back to his place." She looked at me for a moment. "You seem off," she said. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Just tired." She accepted the answer, but I could tell she didn't fully believe it. Days passed, but the guilt stayed. I caught myself replaying that night in my head. The rain, the silence, the almost confession. I kept trying to convince myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just a moment of weakness. But the truth was harder to face. It wasn't about attraction. It was about connection, about feeling seen for the first time in a long time. One night, about a week later, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Maya and I were sitting on the couch after dinner, the TV playing quietly. I turned to her and said, "Can I tell you something?" She looked at me curious but calm. "Of course," she said. I hesitated, feeling my heartbeat in my throat. While Liam was here, I think I crossed a line, I admitted. Her expression changed instantly, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" she asked. I shook my head. Nothing happened. Not physically. But I think I let something emotional happen that shouldn't have. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she leaned back and looked away. "I trusted you," she said softly. There wasn't anger in her voice, just disappointment. That made it worse. I wanted to take it back, to erase the moment, but it was too late. We didn't talk much after that. The silence between us was different now. Not peaceful, but fragile. We stayed together, but something had changed permanently. I spent the following weeks trying to make it right, being more present, more honest. But the guilt stayed like a shadow I couldn't shake. Months later, a postcard arrived in the mail. It was from Liam, a picture of the coast, the kind with endless blue water and sunlight that looked too bright to be real. On the back, in small handwriting, were just 4 words. "I hope you're okay." I stared at it for a long time before tucking it into a drawer. I wasn't sure what he meant by it, maybe an apology, maybe a memory, maybe both. I smiled faintly, not out of happiness, but out of understanding. Some connections don't end in chaos or closure. They just fade quietly, leaving behind lessons about who we are and what lines we should never cross again. Looking out the window that evening, I realized that love isn't just about loyalty to another person. It's also about loyalty to yourself. And sometimes, the hardest part of love is admitting when you've let it drift away without even noticing.